Hello everyone, this is Dalster and welcome to another episode review for Dark Side of the Ring. And in this episode, it focuses on the controversy regarding former WWE wrestler Muhammad Hassan, who was actually an Italian guy playing an Arabic wrestler. During that time, Muhammad's character was very controversial, as the aftermath of 9/11 brought a lot of racism within the Arabic, Middle Easterners, and many more people within the Middle East community. The man behind Muhammad is named Mark Kopani, and he has since retired from wrestling and works as a director in a school district. It was a crazy time in the early 2000s, and looking at it now, there was definitely a lot of racism and hate between the Arab Middle Eastern community and the US. I also have a story about a friend who had gone through the same experience as Muhammad when I was in junior high, which I will explain at the end so that I could summarize the episode first. I'll go over the episode and share my thoughts at the end, along with my friend's story. Just so there is no confusion, I will call Mark by his real name or Muhammad, which is his ring name. First, I'll go over his childhood and then I'll go over his wrestling career. In his childhood, Mark learned to not judge people on their skin color. Mark's father talked to Mark about the struggles that Mark's grandfather was dealing with, as his grandfather was an Italian American, causing Mark to feel sympathy for the Italians. Before going to WWE, Mark was in OVW, Ohio Valley Wrestling, which was a developmental wrestling promotion for wrestlers to develop or obtain skills or wrestling moves before going to WWE. WWE, World Wrestling Entertainment, in the early 2000s was struggling with its wrestlers as they had lost their biggest stars, Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Rock. The company would eventually hire wrestlers from OVW such as John Cena, Brock Lesnar, Batista, and Randy Orton. When Mark came to OVW, he was surprisingly trained by Jim Cornette. And yes, in a clip that they show in the episode, Jim was showing the OVW wrestlers a move inside the ring, which was really shocking to me. Jim said in the episode that he saw a lot of potential and athleticism within Mark. Mark was called Mark Magnus in OVW and had become a main eventer within 2 years since he had started, and soon after became an OVW champion. Then one day, Jim got a call from WWE as the company had told him that they were going to hire Mark, but have him play an Arabic character. Instead of refusing, Mark decided to take the position as it was a huge opportunity for him to be in WWE. His name was changed to Muhammad Hassan. When Mark told his family that he was going to portray an Arab wrestler, they were not okay with it, as Arabic people in the early 2000s were considered untrustable. Once he became the Muhammad character in OVW, first, some of the audience members stuck their middle fingers at him as seen in this episode. WWE at the time wanted to create a character that was inspired by the terrorist attacks that took place in New York on September 11, 2001. This would eventually backfire, but it's not the first time WWE had faced backlash over heels that were from other countries or who were supporters for the other country besides the US. Back then, many foreign wrestlers were big heels, such as Jack Atkinson, also known as Fritz von Erich, who had a Nazi gimmick, or Nikita or Ivan Koloff, who also played Russian heels. Then in 1991, Sergeant Slaughter took on an Iraqi sympathizer gimmick, which would cause a lot of backlash. This ultimately backfired WrestleMania ticket sales, as WWE had sold about 10,000 seats, much less than usual. During the Sergeant Slaughter controversy in the 90s, the Gulf War was going on. After September 11th, many Americans were very traumatized by the terrorist attacks, as they would then look down on the Arab community or any Middle Easterner community. WWE paid tribute to the lives that had been lost on an episode of SmackDown, but it did not end the hatred, as this would have an impact on Mark later on. Before we get into it, we will focus on the Muhammad character in OVW a little bit first. The idea of the Muhammad character was Vince McMahon's idea. In one situation, someone from the audience had attacked Muhammad's manager and partner, Sean Davari, in OVW. Davari was Muhammad's manager who spoke Farsi and is an Iranian American. One wrestler in OVW, while shooting a promo, called Muhammad a disgrace to the country. As Muhammad and Daivari were heading to WWE, they made promos where they were disgruntled and angry in order to highlight and develop the Muhammad character. In a Sunday Night Heat episode, WWE had announced Muhammad's upcoming debut. The hosts of that show interviewed Muhammad and made a joke that Muhammad should not be flying or taking an airplane, which is a stereotype to the Muslim Arab community during the early 2000s. Muhammad Hassan then made his debut on WWE Raw on December 13, 2004. He gets into the ring when Mick Foley does a promo about the US troops and thanking them. When Muhammad disrupted Mick's promo, he said in the promo that he was disgusted by the troops. Some of the audience did not look happy as seen on the clips of the Raw taping, and it felt as though they were holding their US flags very closely. Around 2004, the US were at war with the Middle East as WWE would do shows in Iraq called Tribute to the Troops in order to pay respect to the US military. The war and 9/11 shaped how the US had felt about the people of the Middle East, and with this, it caused an uproar for Mark whenever he went to the ring playing his Muhammad Hassan character. Muhammad would do promos for WWE on how he, Muhammad, and the Arab community were looked down upon since many Americans were prejudiced or resentful to them because of the 9/11 terrorist attacks. He would always start or talk in his promos with, "Since 9/11, the other problem was that Muhammad was a heel, and this did not sit well with the audience, as they legitimately hated the character for real." The signs that the audience would bring were very hateful and aggressive, such as one sign telling Muhammad to go back to his cave, and another showing his name, while Qusay and Saddam Hussein, two Iraqi political leaders, were crossed as it read down below that Muhammad was next to die. Some other signs read that 7-Eleven was hiring, which is another stereotype. Other signs read that Muhammad had stolen someone's camel. Another read to get the hell out of America, and another sign was written as a wanted poster where they wanted Muhammad dead and the reward would be $5 million. Muhammad's manager Daivari also had a sign where it said that Daivari should speak English. Mark mentioned in the episode that the Japanese were also treated horribly in the US during World War II, as he said that it was unfair and disgraceful. Mark experienced what it was like for Arabs dealing with racism in 2004 and in 2005. Even though wrestlers tend to stay in character outside of WWE as well, Mark and Daivari also experienced prejudice and racism. In one incident, he and Daivari were at the airport and the security had stopped Daivari because of his last name. But not for Mark though, because his last name was Italian, so he did not get checked on. Then on an airplane, the passengers around them were very scared and some had to call their loved ones in order to tell them that they loved them, as told by Mark, because they thought that they were gonna die on the plane, due to Daivari and Mark being on the plane. When he and Daivari were in San Francisco, California, a mother and her daughter scooted far away from Mark and Daivari on a sidewalk. When Mark and the other WWE wrestlers were in Australia celebrating at a bar, a group of Arabs approached Mark and Sean as they asked him if he was a Muslim. The Arabs were very upset with Mark for portraying a Muslim character, as he was actually an Italian guy, and it had almost escalated into a fight, but somehow they were able to prevent it from happening. Mark at that point received heat, but not the heat that WWE were expecting. As he became more successful as Muhammad, some of the WWE veterans were not happy because Mark was getting a really big push. In an old match from the past, you can see a group of WWE wrestlers attack Muhammad only instead of going after each other. It was said in the episode that many wrestlers in the locker rooms were not happy with Mark, especially when he would stand up for himself, as some had ganged up on him. At one point, they had a wrestler's court behind the scenes in order to come into some agreement, with The Undertaker being the judge, as Undertaker back in the day was considered a locker room leader. An example of locker room disagreements is when Mark had confronted Eddie Guerrero regarding a finisher that he had his Muhammad character use, which was a move that the Iron Sheik had used in the 80s. Mark was not happy that Eddie was using it, and that WWE had stopped Mark from using it. As he went up to Eddie, Eddie had told Mark that his family had used the camel clutch for years. Eventually, Eddie had let bygones be bygones, as he had told Mark that he knew that Mark did not mean to be so rude. Since then, Muhammad got into a promo segment for WrestleMania 21, as he said in the promo that he did not get a match. Then Hulk Hogan appeared, as the audience were ecstatic to see him back then, and that was back in the day. Muhammad and Daivari tried to beat up Hulk Hogan. Too bad they didn't, but they were beaten by Hulk and thrown over the ring. In another promo, Stone Cold Steve Austin had called Muhammad a piece of garbage. Vince tried to push Muhammad even further, as he wanted to radicalize him, so he had Muhammad have a group of black masked men who were kind of like servants to Muhammad or security of some sort. At that point, Mark said that he felt as though the character was becoming more insensitive. He tried to talk with Stephanie McMahon, who was working with the talent back then, but Mark said in the episode that she seemed to not be okay with his frustrations, as if she was telling him to just deal with it. At that point, Mark felt that Muhammad Hassan was losing his touch and had no control of it, as it took a toll on him. When Muhammad crossed his thumb, like The Undertaker in WWE SmackDown episode, the audience were not happy about it, as some thought it to be a beheading symbol connected to the Middle Easterners. Mark said in the episode that it was not his idea. Jim said in the episode that Vince was even going to have Muhammad face world champion Batista at one point. Instead, they had Daivari face The Undertaker and lose, as Daivari was sacrificed for the storyline in order to add to Muhammad's character development. During that period in 2005, London, England just had a terrorist attack. Instead of toning it down, WWE continued with Muhammad's storyline, as you can see him in the episode going on his knees, yelling out Allah, and having the black masked men come out from backstage. One of the masked men looks as though he is choking The Undertaker to death. Muhammad then comes to the ring and has his arms raised in the air, as he is over The Undertaker's body and gives The Undertaker a camel clutch. Around that time as well, journalists from the US in the early 2000s were beheaded by terrorists, as these beheadings can be seen through videos or by the dark web. After that segment at SmackDown, controversy would arise for WWE. The newspapers and the UPN television network were against that segment, as they had enough of Muhammad Hassan. Many WWE employees in that time period were also against Muhammad's storylines or promos, as WWE had gone as far as using real-life tragic events for storylines. Michael Leonardi, who was a WWE writer and producer, tried to talk to Vince and put a stop to it, but got demoted for speaking up. UPN eventually told WWE to get rid of Muhammad immediately, as the storylines were getting out of hand because of receiving threats and losing sponsors. At that point, Mark had felt that WWE was stereotyping Middle Easterners too much. When Mark talked to Johnny Ace about him buying a house, Johnny had told Mark to not buy it. It was there that Mark knew that the Muhammad character was done. Muhammad's last match was with The Undertaker at the Great American Bash. Mark said in the episode that he was brutally beaten in the match and was thrown off the stage by Undertaker's finisher, Last Ride. He said that after the match, he had felt heartbroken, as he thought that everything that he had worked for was gone. Wrestler Maven said in the episode that Mark did a great job and followed orders that WWE had given him to do, but was let go from the company. After WWE, Mark had turned his back to wrestling and lived in Los Angeles, as he had felt lost. Gene Snitsky said in the episode that he felt that Mark was wasted as a character but had so much potential. After days have passed, Mark was able to get up on his feet and went to college while working at UPS. Later on, Mark would work as a teacher, then moved up to be a principal, and would eventually work as a director for human resources at a school district. Maven said that Mark is a talented and gifted man at the end of the episode. Mark also said that he has no regrets playing Muhammad Hassan and was proud of taking part. He felt that the character was not going to last on TV, as the world is changing every day. Since the airing of this episode, Mark said that he still talks to Sean Daivari, as Sean still works with WWE, but as a WWE agent. Mark said at the end of the episode that he is the man that he is today because of his wrestling career, and plans to do big things in the future. Interviewers for this episode are Mark Kopani, Muhammad Hassan, Jim Cornette, Maven Huffman, Chris Masters, Chris Mordetsky, John Pollock, journalist, Michael Leonardi, former WWE writer and producer, and Gene Snitsky. I give this episode a 9 out of 10, as it was a little rushed, but it was interesting to get the scoop on what went down with Mark when he played the Mohammed Hassan character. While it may not have anything to do with the drugs or the usual things we see on Dark Side of the Ring, I think it's important that we look back at how bad racism was after the events that had occurred after 9/11. 9/11 was a scary time in the United States of America for everyone living at that time period, but the aftermath did not really resolve anything. Many people, from what I heard, were against the Iraq War and hated George W. Bush's presidential reign during that time. There was just a lot of fear everywhere, and psychologically, it hurt many Middle Easterners and Arabic people. It made me feel bad for Mark and Sean Davari because mostly Mark, as Mohammed, had the entire company on their backs when carrying Mohammed's storyline. Americans during that time period were always paying tribute to the US with their American flags, most notably seen on the cars. It was the right place but at the wrong time for Mark, and because of that, he almost gave up wrestling. He did come back to retire from wrestling in 2018 though. It was really sad to hear that he and Davari had experienced so much hate during that time. I actually thought that they played great heels, but to connect it to 9/11 was not the best choice when the US was still grieving. Mark had a lot of potential, as I don't think that it was necessary for him to play a character who had no ties to his heritage. But WWE should have had him play an Italian character or something that he was comfortable with. It was such a dark period during that time. I am glad that things eventually settled down for Mark and Sean, as they have different lives compared to how their lives were in the early 2000s. It's really amazing that Mark is now a director for a school. Very different from wrestling, but at least he made it through. I also remember how one of my favorite bands, called System of a Down, received a lot of criticism after 9/11 because people thought that they were Arabic, but were an Armenian band, and the country of Armenia is from the Asia continent. Reading Serge Tankian's book gives a better insight to the racism and prejudice that he and the band had endured shortly after the 9/11 attacks that had taken place. Also, I'm planning to do a book review that's coming out pretty soon. When I was in junior high around 2006 and 2007, racism between the Arabic people was still going on. I didn't realize it until I looked back at that time frame when I was writing my book. In the 8th grade, I became friends with this new student at the time, who was Arabic and a very short guy. His name was actually Mohammed, but spelled differently than Mohammed Hassan's name. He was very friendly with me, but for whatever reason would forget to bring his backpack sometimes. And it was a huge backpack. I don't know how he forgot. Really, I don't know how he forget that thing. I never really had issues with Mohammed during his time in junior high, as he was a very friendly guy. By the way, I'm not Arabic, but my real name is very popular in the Arabic community as I am a Mexican woman. He, along with his friend, who I think was Indian or Muslim, named Shafka, was also in my class, and they get picked on by people. I did not know why at first, but it made sense when I connected Mohammed Hassan with my friend Mohammed. The only difference is that Mohammed was actually Arab, while the other Mohammed was a wrestler, played by an Italian guy. It was very messed up that they got bullied, and I thought it was because they were very short back then. But there was also this Muslim Arabic group at lunch who were also picked on and ridiculed during that time. I remember in the morning when we had PE, I saw Mohammed with a huge purple eye and asked him what had happened, and he told me that he had hit himself with the door, which was not true. It turned out that Mohammed got punched so hard by a guy who I actually had a crush on at the time. But he was a retainee, as he was supposed to be in high school when I was in the 8th grade. Mohammed probably never told me because he probably knew that I had a crush on him but did not want to hurt my feelings. That guy, from what I can remember, hated my friend Mohammed so bad. But I don't know if it was because Mohammed was Arabic or some other reason, as that guy who hit Mohammed and gave him a purple eye was a Native American, and he supported the US military. He was also in one of those military-based programs that they had in high school back then. I don't know if they still have them though. Mohammed unfortunately left and moved back to Saudi Arabia, but we still kept in contact since he was also into watching WWE as well. The last time I talked to him was in 2021 when I told him about the Arabic people receiving racism and hate during 9/11 and asked if that one guy really did punch him, to which Mohammed replied with yes. I really did feel so bad for Mohammed, as I wish I could have done something, but that one guy was a very big troublemaker during 8th grade. So there was nothing I could do. At that time, I was not aware about the backlash many Arabics were going through until I got older. It's sort of like the same thing that had happened with the Asian community when COVID-19 was spreading everywhere. Many people, even the country of Australia, were very hateful and racist towards any Asian person, even throwing acid at them. But yeah, it's the hate that you give that really causes so much pain for any community. Even though Mark was not really Arab, he was still receiving hate for playing an Arabic character. It's just very sad what people had endured because of wars or any terrorist attacks or etc. I really do hope that we could improve as a community and learn to love or appreciate each other, no matter where you are from. It's a long stretch, but I do think that it is possible if people can just put their hate and judgment aside. I did not care if Muhammad was Arabic. As long as he was nice and friendly, then he is okay with me in my book. It takes a lot for people to know someone. It's like the old saying goes, you have to know what it's like to be in their shoes. Muhammad, if you're watching this and you know who I am, let me know. And to the guy that gave Muhammad a purple eye, I have a lot of explaining to do. Also, you had some issues with me a couple months ago that I would like to resolve, by the way. Sorry if it got too political, but I just wanted to share how it was for my friend Muhammad and explain an example of what happened during that time frame. I hope one day we can stop racism because it does not help in the end. And it never has. That's all I gotta say about this episode. But thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next season, which is probably next year. That's it for season 6. Take care of yourself and everyone around you, and I'll do the same too. Bye guys.